Welcome to another edition of The Fan Perspective. I am your host, Nathan Nile. It is 12:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I'm staying up late to work on an English assignment, and I just don't feel like doing it, so I decided to distract myself for another half hour to do this. Week 13, wasn't it? Let me look at this again. Yes, it was week 13, I'm sorry. I forgot to update my thing. Anyways, week 13 in the NFL was very exciting. I was right about so many things. For one thing, Atlanta is the top of the league for a reason. And against two of the best QBs in the league, Drew Brees and Peyton Manning, that defense stepped up to the plate and beasted. Cleveland has the young talent to potentially be in the playoffs in a couple of seasons. And despite the injuries, the Packers are still a strong team with one of the best QBs in the NFL. And speaking of the best in the NFL, Peyton Manning proved to be way too much for the Bucs defense to handle. And I was wrong about a few games too. Kansas City came out and played inspired football in the wake of a tragedy, and yet again we have another example this season of how football can be more than just a game. And Charlie Batch led an inspired comeback against the Steelers and kept their playoff hopes alive with an upset win over the Ravens. And Colin Kaepernick, I will eventually learn to say his name right. He lost for the first time as a starter, but it could just be that the Rams have the 49ers numbers. Anyways, he is still going to be the starter next season. I did pick the Giants to win, but I knew it was a possibility the Redskins could pull one out, and I'm not shocked that they did manage to find a way to win. The surprise team of the week for me would have to be the Cowboys. Even though I did pick them to win, I had no idea how they would perform. Their defense, I was shocked because that's the worst I have ever seen them play in a very long while. But then again, on the same time, their offense, with DeMarco Murray back, he provided a big boost. And Tony Romo had a huge night as well. It was a very balanced attack, which proved to be way too much for the Eagles' defense to handle. And the Cowboys, with that win, and especially with the Giants losing, they are now back in the playoff hunt. Let's see how they do against an actual team, though. It was the Eagles. They have much tougher matchups ahead. And I did say that the Lions would win, but I was just playing a hunch. The Colts were the favorites and are cementing their playoffs hopes with yet another win. And we all knew that this was coming. We all knew that eventually, sometime this season, Mark Sanchez would throw one too many interceptions and he would get benched. And I think that Rex Ryan planned this out perfectly. He knew the stir that would cause if he benched Mark in favor of Tim Tebow. So he had Tim Tebow fake an injury so that he'd have an excuse to hold him out of the game, and so they could throw in the third stringer. And the Jets barely managed to pull out a win. And Rex Ryan will not comment on who's going to be the starter next week. And a few key injuries. Ryan Broyles is now out for the season with a torn ACL, and Titus Young still being a disciplinary case and could potentially remain inactive for the rest of the season. So Mike Thomas is now the second receiver on the depth chart for the Lions, which means Calvin Johnson's numbers are going to start going way up. Let's talk about the playoff picture briefly. If the playoffs started next week, the Ravens would be playing the Steelers. That's always an interesting matchup. The Seahawks would be playing the Packers, and we all remember what happened last time they faced each other. And the Colts would be playing the Broncos. Peyton Manning going against his former team and his successor. And that I want to see that shit. I mean, the AFC, the playoffs are pretty much set. The only real possible shakeup could be that the Bengals potentially unseating the Steelers, or the Colts, or possibly even taking the division from the Ravens. It seems unlikely that they would finish any higher than the 6th seed, but that's pretty much the only thing left to determine. Will the Bengals be able to sneak in? And in the NFC, the Saints are officially out of the playoff picture now, while the Cowboys are back in it. The Seahawks won and are now in control of their future. They are the leader in the hunt for that last playoff spot, and they've won head-to-head matchups against some of the other teams in the hunt. And I find it funny that the Packers, they lost one game last week to the defending champions, and somehow everybody just starts saying, "Oh, they're not gonna make the playoffs," and then 1 week later they're back at the top of the division again. It's funny how that happens. And with the Redskins beating the Giants on Monday Night Football, the NFC East is now wide open. The Giants barely hold on to a one-game lead over the Cowboys and the Redskins. With a few weeks left in the season, it's really anybody's game at the moment. For week 13, I was 8-7. My overall record is now 105-65. That's pretty dang good. And for the Thursday night game, well, it's I'm sorry. For the Thursday night game, it's gonna be interesting. We have the Broncos at the Raiders, and okay, come on, seriously, it's the Broncos. Okay, I don't even have to analyze this one. There's basically no possibility that the Raiders can win this. Honestly, let's be real here. It's the Broncos. Anyways, tune in next week for another edition of Reflections from week whatever. Tune in Friday and Saturday for predictions. And also tune in later today, not only for fantasy football reflections on week 13, but I'm doing a special video about the rewards that I will be handing out at the end of the season. There will not be any actual physical rewards, but you can have your input on who gets named certain things.